The Johnson family thought moving into their dream home would mark a fresh start. They never imagined it would turn into a nightmare they couldn't escape. It was supposed to be perfect. A small family of 3, Karen, Tom, and their 7-year-old daughter Lily, had finally found the home they'd always wanted. A charming 2-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. But beneath its inviting exterior, something sinister waited, and what they uncovered would haunt them forever. It all started on their first night in the new house. As Karen unpacked in the kitchen, she felt an odd chill. The thermostat read 72 degrees, but the air felt icy against her skin. Brushing it off as first-night jitters, she called Tom to help her unpack while Lily played in her new room. A few hours later, they heard a loud thud from upstairs. Rushing to Lily's room, they found her standing in the corner staring at the wall. "There's someone in the closet," she whispered, her voice trembling. Tom opened the closet door to reveal nothing. It was empty except for some old coat hangers left behind by the previous owners. They laughed nervously, chalking it up to Lily's overactive imagination. But as the days went on, the quirks of the house became harder to ignore. Things escalated quickly. One night, while watching TV in the living room, Karen saw movement out of the corner of her eye. She turned to see a shadow dart across the hallway. "Tom, did you see that?" she asked, her voice shaking. Before he could answer, the TV flickered off and every light in the house went out. They heard footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps, echoing from the staircase. Tom grabbed a flashlight and ran to investigate, but the house was empty. They decided to check the attic. It was the only place they hadn't fully explored since moving in. What they found sent chills down their spines. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard was an old, dust-covered journal. The entries were written in shaky handwriting, detailing the life of a woman who had lived in the house decades earlier. The final entry read, "I can't take it anymore. The whispers, the shadows, they won't stop. If you're reading this, get out. It's not safe here." One cold winter night, the family heard a loud crash from the basement. Tom grabbed a baseball bat and headed downstairs while Karen and Lily stayed in the kitchen, clutching each other for comfort. In the basement, Tom found shelves toppled over, broken glass scattered across the floor. But what caught his attention was the message scrawled in black soot on the far wall. "You can't leave." He backed away slowly, his heart racing, but before he could reach the stairs, the door slammed shut, trapping him inside. Upstairs, Karen and Lily screamed as the lights flickered violently and the temperature plummeted. Karen grabbed Lily and ran for the front door, but it wouldn't budge. From the corner of the room, Karen saw her, the woman Lily had been talking about. Pale, with hollow eyes and a tattered dress, she stood motionless, staring at them. The family gathered in the living room, trying to piece together what was happening. Karen suggested calling the police, but the phones were dead, and their cell phones showed no signal. Desperate for answers, Tom decided to go back into the basement, this time armed with a crowbar. He pried up the floorboards where he'd found the journal. Beneath them was a small, rotted chest. Inside, they found a bundle of old photographs, a cracked locket, and a stack of letters. The letters revealed the horrifying truth. The house had once belonged to a woman named Margaret Fletcher, who had lived there in the 1940s. Margaret had been widowed during the war and in her grief had taken in a drifter for company. But the man she trusted turned out to be a monster. The letters hinted at abuse, manipulation, and ultimately murder. Margaret wrote of hearing voices and seeing shadows, symptoms of her crumbling sanity, or so she thought. In the final letter, she confessed to killing the drifter in self-defense and burying him in the basement. The guilt consumed her, and she took her own life shortly after. But her spirit remained, bound to the house by her guilt and fear. And now she was warning the Johnsons before they met the same fate. The Johnsons never returned to the house. They sold it at a loss, leaving behind everything they owned. Months later, they learned that the new owners had mysteriously disappeared, their car still parked in the driveway. To this day, no one stays in that house for long. Locals avoid it, calling it the When a family moves into a picturesque countryside home, they discover a room that wasn't listed on the blueprints. What's inside will make you question reality itself. The Martins thought they were getting a fresh start. Daniel, Laura, and their two kids, Ellie and Liam, arrived in their new home full of hope. The move to the small, quiet city seemed perfect for their family. Their new house was a spacious two-story building on a lonely cul-de-sac, surrounded by tall, dark trees that swayed even when there was no wind. The realtor had been unusually quick to accept their offer. Such a deal for a house this big, Laura had said. She loved the space, the large kitchen, and the view of the backyard. Daniel was happy because they were saving money. But as they unpacked on the first evening, the house felt off. While bringing in boxes, Ellie tugged on her father's sleeve and pointed upstairs. "Daddy, there's someone in my window." Daniel looked. The curtain of Ellie's new room swayed, but no one was there. "It's just the breeze, honey," he reassured her. "No one's up there." Ellie didn't argue, but she didn't seem convinced either. She turned and took her son by the arm. The first few days went by quietly, but the unease in the house grew stronger. At night, Laura heard faint footsteps upstairs when everyone was asleep. She blamed it on the house settling. One night, while preparing dinner, Liam ran into the kitchen, pale-faced. "Mommy, Ellie won't stop knocking on the walls," he stammered. Laura frowned. "Ellie's playing in her room." Liam shook his head. "But I heard it. She's knocking right now." When Laura called Ellie, she insisted she hadn't been near the walls at all. "I was playing with my dolls," Ellie said quietly. Liam wouldn't sleep in his room that night. On their second week, Daniel decided to check out the basement. The realtor had casually mentioned the door had been locked for years. Daniel thought nothing of it. Old houses had quirks after all. He broke the lock and pulled open the heavy door. A foul, damp smell hit him. The basement was cold, much colder than the rest of the house, and cluttered with old furniture and broken boxes. At the far end of the basement stood another door. It looked much older, with deep scratches around the handle, as if someone, or something, had tried to claw its way in. "What the hell?" Daniel muttered. He tried the door. It wouldn't budge. Locked. As he turned back toward the stairs, he noticed something chilling. On the dusty basement floor were small footprints, bare, as if a child had walked through the grime. Daniel rushed upstairs, locking the basement behind him. He didn't tell Laura. That night, Laura woke to the sound of crying. Soft, muffled sobs drifted down the hallway. She sat up and nudged Daniel. "Ellie's crying. I'll go check on her." She crept down the hallway, but Ellie was fast asleep in her bed. The crying, however, continued from inside the walls. Laura froze, her skin prickling. "Ellie?" she whispered. No response. She backed into the hallway and gasped. At the far end, a shadow stood perfectly still. It was tall and human-like, but its arms were too long. It didn't move, but she could feel its gaze. Laura sprinted back to her room, slamming the door behind her. Daniel woke up to find her shaking in bed. "There's someone in the house," she whispered. Daniel grabbed his bat and searched the halls. Nothing. The figure was gone. The next morning, Laura insisted Daniel check the security cameras they'd installed outside and inside the house. Daniel rewound the footage to the night before. At 2:15 a.m., the hallway camera flickered. For a split second, a tall shadow appeared at the end of the hall. Its limbs were distorted, inhuman. Then it disappeared. Daniel turned pale. "What is that?" "That's what I saw," Laura said. They stared at the footage in silence, dread sinking in. A few days later, Laura found Ellie sitting alone at the bottom of the stairs, whispering. "Who are you talking to, sweetheart?" Laura asked gently. Ellie looked up. "The man in the basement. He says he wants to come upstairs." Laura felt cold all over. "What man?" "The tall man," Ellie replied. "He says he's hungry." That night, everything came to a head. Laura and Daniel decided to keep the kids in their room, afraid to leave them alone. Around midnight, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. Heavy, deliberate steps. Then came the knocking. First on the walls, then the doors. One by one, every door in the house thudded violently. Laura screamed as the lights flickered. Daniel grabbed his bat and ran toward the hallway, yelling, "Leave us alone!" The basement door suddenly swung open with a loud bang. From the top of the stairs, Daniel watched in horror as the tall, shadowy figure crawled out of the basement. Its limbs jerked unnaturally as it rose to its full height. "Get the kids out!" Daniel shouted to Laura. Laura grabbed Ellie and Liam, running toward the car. Daniel backed into the living room, his heart racing as the figure advanced toward him. Then the whispers started. Dozens of voices, overlapping and growing louder. "Get out! Get out! Get out!" Daniel sprinted after his family, slamming the front door behind him. The Martins never went back to the house. They stayed in a motel that night, too afraid to speak about what happened. When they called the realtor the next day, she confessed the truth. It was hard to think about the day that Lord Dundas died. Late one winter night, Alex and his friends decided to take a shortcut through an old abandoned road deep in the forest. Locals called it the Forgotten Road, a place of whispers and legends. They didn't believe the stories until the snowstorm began and the shadows came alive. The deeper they went, the stranger it got. Lights flickered in the trees, and whispers danced around them. But no one was there. Their car broke down, and what followed was a night of terror they'd never forget. Something was hunting them, something that didn't belong in this world. They had to survive until dawn, or be swallowed by the forgotten forever. Unimpressed, Nanja looked down the trail toward the mountain. Alex sat in the driver's seat, staring at the faded wooden sign that read, "The Forgotten Road." His friends laughed, dismissing the ominous stories, and urged him to keep driving. Snow began to fall, blanketing the dark forest ahead. The road was narrow and winding, with trees leaning in as if they were trying to block their path. The headlights barely pierced the darkness, and an unnatural stillness hung in the air. Suddenly, faint whispers began to echo in the car. Alex tightened his grip on the wheel, his breath visible in the freezing air. Outside, the shadows seemed to move, watching them as they passed. Without warning, the car sputtered and died, leaving them stranded. The whispers grew louder, and the shadows drew closer, pressing against the windows. They decided to walk, hoping to find help. The snowstorm grew fiercer, and with each step the whispers seemed to follow. Alex turned back and froze. There were footprints in the snow behind them, but they weren't theirs. That glimmering point in the sky was their destination. The old center person gave hers as they decided to walk, hoping to find help. The snowstorm grew. Scream cut through the storm as one of their friends vanished into the darkness. A creature emerged from the shadows, its elongated limbs and glowing eyes locking onto them. They found an old shack and barricaded themselves inside. The whispers turned to pounding as the creature circled the building, its claws scraping against the walls. The door burst open and the creature lunged inside. Alex grabbed a broken plank, swinging it desperately. The whispers turned into deafening screams as the friends fought for their lives. As dawn broke, Alex stumbled out of the forest, bloodied and freezing. Behind him, the shadows retreated, but the whispers lingered in the wind. Months later, Alex swore he could still hear the whispers when the wind blew cold. Some roads are better left forgotten.